It's just, I think we saw the best and the worst of both teams in this in these 180 minutes. And then on balance, like I kind of wrote this. I had to do a match report on this for Forbes, and I wrote on balance that ultimately Germany is just slightly ahead in their development than Italy is, and that's why they prevailed. But like I think on reflection, like if Germany had, let's say Germany had won this game 3 or 4-0 in the second leg, and it was going in that direction, I don't think it would have actually really reflected where those two nations are in terms of strength. I think they're actually quite close to one another, and I think Italy is a country that's slowly re-emerging as a powerhouse, right? We see it with the club football as well. And so on balance, you would say, like, if someone had said to you, oh yeah, like Germany edged Italy 5-4 on aggregate, you would said like, yeah, okay, that seems right. But I think then I personally looked at that second leg and I thought, okay, those first 45 minutes were the best 45 minutes of the Julian Nagelsmann era. And I put on Blue Sky, said if the first 45 minutes were the best, then maybe the second 45 were the worst. And then maybe, excluding that Italy and Turkey game at the very start of his era, right? That was some horrendous football as well. But the second half was just such a mad sense of loss of control. And I think some of it was accelerated by his substitutions, but it really was from the start of the second half that they completely and utterly lost control, and it put such a dampener on it in so many ways, in my opinion, because that first half they were so brilliant, Stefan. It was accelerating football. They were quick. They were just every step that they made, they were faster than the Italians. I mean, it was so well summed up in that second goal that Musiala scored, right, where the Italians were still bickering with one another in the penalty box, and Germany just went on with it and scored the most bizarre corners of all corners. But like, I think that was like such a really good example because Germany were just on it. And then Italy comes back into the game in the second half with, I think it was a Kimmich giveaway. And then Kane scores a really beautiful goal from it. But it's just kind of funny how, like, we went from this amazing Germany performance to this really poor Germany performance all within 90 minutes of football.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with you. After the way the first, I mean, we spoke about the first leg on the last bonus show last week, and we talked about the manner in which Germany won that game and how it maybe wasn't a great performance over the course of 90 minutes, but, they were clinical, big players stepped up, they had their big moments, and crucially, they obviously, more or less won the game on set pieces, to be perfectly honest with you. With big players stepping up, Goretzka I thought was outstanding in that first game.
Yeah.
It was great tonight as well, actually, I thought. But Nagelsmann made some changes going into this game. He obviously brought in Kleindienst to start up front over Burkhardt. He dropped Amiri, who also had a very quiet game against the Italians. He brought in Mittelstadt. He kind of changed his formation around. Brought in Angelo Stiller instead of Pascal Gross. And, as you said, like very quickly in the first half, it's like, oh, right, okay, Nagelsmann knows how to beat this Italian team. He needed 90 minutes in Milan, but he now knows how to do it. He's got the tactics spot on. Where Germany were quite ponderous in possession in the first leg, and the Italians were very good defensively and on the counter-attack. This game started in a manner in which you could see that the Italians felt like they had to obviously go out and attack because they were having to overturn the deficit from the first leg. And that kind of played into Germany's hands. Germany were able to play, they pressed extremely high, extremely aggressively. And in that first half, they just completely nailed Italy back into their own half. And as you said, obviously the goal comes about from a remarkable goal comes about from Kimmich just basically passing the ball to Musiala when nobody was paying any attention. But even like the Kleindienst goal as well on the stroke of halftime was outstanding as well. And we said at half time, well, you didn't, but I said, game's over, it's done. They've absolutely, it was a routing, really, to be perfectly honest with you. Italy looked absolutely destroyed. But I think two things probably happened in the second half, or maybe two or three things. The first one is that Italy obviously came out like a wounded, lion or something. Pride was obviously wounded. They felt they had to go out and prove themselves in the second half. They obviously didn't think they were probably going to win the tie, but they had to prove that they were better than they'd shown in the first half. And, I'm sure Spalletti gave them the old hairdryer treatment or something. And that's exactly what they did. They came out, they did much better. Also, they took off Gatti, the Juventus defender, who I thought had an absolute shocking game. He was at fault for at least two of the Germany goals in the first half. So Italy come out. They're far more determined to prove that they're better in the first half. Shows Kane scores an outstanding goal like 4 minutes into the game. A goal that came from nowhere. I think it was Sani passed the ball to Kimmich. Kimmich doesn't get to it, and then Keane basically just 4 or 5 yards outside the goal, just turns around and fires a goal in the bottom corner. Outstanding goal, and it was completely out of the blue. But I think the other problem that happened was that you have an Italian team who had their tails up after scoring and having a point to prove. But I also feel like the other issue is that Nagelsmann turned to that bench and there just weren't good enough options there to kind of say, right, I need you to go on and win this game for us. Or not to win the game, obviously, because Germany are already winning, but to go on and ensure we continue to dominate it. Amiri comes on for Goretzka, doesn't have a great game. Adeyemi comes on for Leroy Sané, and I think Adeyemi's had great moments for Germany, for Dortmund this season, but he's a fair weather player at the best of times. He's not the kind of guy who's going to grab a game by the scruff of the neck and keep the ball and battle defenders. Pascal Gross comes on for Angelo Stiller, and I said before the game I thought Gross had a terrible game in Italy, and I don't think it was much better in this match. And then they brought in Robert Andrich as well from Musiala, who got much quieter in the second half after having an outstanding first half. And then Bissek came on for Rudiger, and I didn't think he played well at all, to be perfectly honest with you. So just about every player who came on from that Germany bench just didn't really step up compared to the players that they were replacing. So it felt like as the second half went on, Italy were getting better, Germany were getting worse. And it was a good thing in the end that Germany had obviously racked up that 3-goal lead in the first half, because if it had been 1 or 2, then I think they could have been in real trouble.
Well, I sensed that they came out of the second half thinking the tie was over. Yeah. I think that was actually probably the biggest problem. It reminded me so much of that Germany game against Sweden early on in the Joachim Löw era, and a game that actually in the long run really helped Germany manifest themselves as the imminent power of European football, right? Because I think that's when they learned this valuable lesson that they can be amazing, but you have to play for full 90 minutes at this level to win a game, right? And so I had the sense that this could actually have a similar effect on this Germany team, because so many things that Nagelsmann has implemented since he's head coach have worked so very well, right? And I mean this team is on a completely different level than they were even just 18 months ago, right? I mean this is a big success going through against Italy, and the second 45 minutes were to forget, but the first 45 minutes was so brilliant, and everything that they did was spot on. The tactics were spot on. Schlotterbeck was amazing. Musiala was amazing. Kimmich, I mean, his 180 minutes against Italy, what was it? A goal and 4 assists as a right back. And that's an incredible number, right? And I think this generation or this team needed to have the experience of what it means if you don't see an opponent out like that. This is not going to happen to them again. I can guarantee you that this will not happen to them. Like, put a proper scare into them. But you could sense it from the moment they came onto the field in the second half, and there was a moment where Tah played the ball kind of lazily across the field to Kimmich, and it went out, and Kimmich just kind of went over there and gave him a lecture, and it's like what are you doing, right? And it was 3-1 at that point, and that's when I kind of looked at it and I said they're not taking this serious anymore. There's probably a lot of heads on that team already that are kind of thinking I have a really big game next Saturday for my club team. Champions League is just around the corner. The Bundesliga title race, you could kind of sense that some of these players were kind of switching off. And I think that is probably even a bigger lesson. And then for Nagelsmann, I think problems started before Pascal Gross came on, but it didn't exactly help Let's say it that way. Like he wasn't, with him on the field, they weren't able to regain control. I thought the midfield was much better with Stiller on there. I also think, of course, the Sané thing, I thought he was better than in the first leg, but he is not Florian Wirtz. The system that they played today was a system with 2 number 10s, and it's obviously designed that when Wirtz comes back, he'll be playing in that role with together with Jamal Musiala, and I think it would be an absolutely amazing thing. But you could see that wasn't really working. And then the problem I had with Adeyemi, and I think he really tried really hard, but he isn't exactly a player that will give you control. In a situation where you needed control, he wasn't it, right? And maybe that's also the squad composition. There is a lot of injuries in this Germany team. There wasn't as much maybe from the bench than you usually would have. I'm just looking at the players that were still available. Yeah, you had, like, on the bench, you still had David Raum, Leveling, Burkhardt, Koch. Like, none of these names are necessarily names that you would throw on in a situation like that. And maybe there's a lesson there too, that you try to bring players with you that when things go sideways, as they did in this game, that you can maybe bring in some more stability. But I think that's an important lesson. And then when I listened to Nagelsmann's post-match comments, you could sense his frustration with the second half, because it's always the final impression is the one that lasts, right? We're not going to think back on those first 45 minutes necessarily. We're going to talk about the second 45 minutes. And it almost felt like a defeat in some ways, didn't it?
Yeah, well, I said on social media at full time, I was like, Nagelsmann will be absolutely furious with the way this game ended, because, that'll piss him off more than anything else, the fact the manner in which they capitulated in the second half.